Hello, good morning, everyone. So today we are going to be taking up the lab number 2, as well as the test 2 review. Okay. So as I told you, and I posted an announcement about this as well, test 2 is going to be next Wednesday, and you don't have to come to class for next Wednesday. But we do have a new lecture on Monday on uh, the kidneys, okay, the renal system, which is not part of the test, but we still have to carry on with a lesson nevertheless. So do plan to come. All right, let's get started then. Over here, we have a brain model, and this is the right hemisphere. And you probably should know that. Right hemisphere. Okay. And the question asks us to identify the lobes A, B, C, and D. Right? So that's pretty straightforward. A is the frontal lobe. And it's like the whole blue area, right? Not just this shade out area there. Like this model contains more information than we learned, right? So that's why it has like additional areas that looks unfamiliar to us. But this whole blue area, that would be the frontal lobe. Okay, so B, we have the parietal lobe. And C is the occipital lobe. D, of course, is the temporal lobe. And what sensory information are processed by B, C, and D? B is the parietal lobe. You should know by now that is responsible for somatosenses. Okay, so things that are felt by receptors in your skin. Occipital lobe is for vision. Temporal lobe is for olfactory, which is smell, as well as auditory, sound. Frontal lobe does not process any senses. Frontal lobe, if anything, is where voluntary actions are initiated, okay? In response to the perception of these different senses. We're going to act accordingly, right? So that's the job of the frontal lobe, right? Okay, moving on. Label E, F, and G. So E is the little brain, right? That's the cerebellum. And the next part of the question asks, what kind of memories are stored at E? So cerebellum is responsible for storing, it stores skill memory. Okay, so e.g., riding a bike, typing, okay? Things that you do with your hands, right? Maybe like piano, piano, right? All these things that you do with muscles, right? Repetition, those kind of things will be stored in the cerebellum. F is pointing at the structure right there. That would be the pons. And G is the medulla oblongata. Okay. Next, label the functional cortex H and I and describe their function. So when I say functional cortex, I'm talking about like the primary motor cortex as well as the primary somatosensory cortex. But don't forget that they are actually located on the precentral gyrus. So that is the bum that is in front of the central sulcus, right? And behind that, we would have the post-central gyrus. So these are not functional, these are not names that describe what they do, right? These are just names that describe the physical location on the brain. So located on the primary, located on the precentral gyrus, you're gonna have your primary motor cortex. And to keep it short, basically, it's responsible for initiates voluntary movement, right? Of skeletal muscle. On the opposite side of the body, of course. And H is the primary somatosensory cortex, which is responsible for processing or processes somatosenses, right? Which includes things like touch, temperature, pain, right? You're familiar with these examples by now, you should be. And of course, I kept on saying in class that these areas are actually zoned to a particular region of the body. So, you know, the face, the hand, you remember that picture, right? Okay, so if we flip the brain model to the other side, we will be able to see the medial view. Can someone tell me what A is, please? What is A here?
Corpus callosum.
Yep, you got it, Zia. Thank you. Corpus callosum. And that is white matter, a bundle of white matter that allows communication. Communication between the hemisphere. Okay, allow the left side of the brain to talk to the right side of the brain. And B over here is referring to this structure. And I said, if I point to that, I'm always asking about the brain part and not the cavity, right? Not the ventricle, right? So this is the thalamus, okay, which helps filter and relay sensory information, right? Okay, so all the sensory information will go through the thalamus, except for which sense? Do you guys remember?
Olfactory.
That's
The
right,
smell.
except for smell, right? So the smell will go directly to the temporal lobe without going through the thalamus. So filters and relay sensory information, except olfactory, except for smell. All right. And I'm just gonna put it right here as a side note. And I expect you to already know this. It forms the lateral side of the third ventricle. Okay. I keep on saying, right? Like if you imagine the room you're sitting in right now, the left wall and the white wall, those would be the right thalamus and the left thalamus. Okay. What would the floor be made of in this analogy? The right and left are the two thalami. What's the floor?
Hypothalamus.
Hypothalamus, that's correct. Okay, it's below, right? Below the thalamus, you have the hypothalamus. Very good. Speaking of which, that would be the next thing right here. C. So C is the hypothalamus. And D is below it, and that would be the pituitary gland. Okay, and both of them actually helps maintain homeostasis, right? Internal balance by secretion of hormones. Okay, so they work with each other, and then there are like a bunch of hormones that they will secrete for regulation. Sorry, I got distracted. The hypothalamus will secrete some hormones, and then it will be stored in the pituitary gland. And then pituitary gland also makes its own hormone, and the two of them actually work together to decide what hormone will be needed at a specific circumstances, and all those relationships we are going to learn in lecture number 12. Okay. Can you believe we're already halfway done? Right? More than halfway done, right? Very close to the finish line here. Good work. All right, E. E is pointing at this little structure, right? By now, you probably have seen this many times already, right? That would be the fourth ventricle, right? You think back the first time we learned the lecture number 7, right? 6, lecture number 6, right? There's so many terms, but by now you've seen them so often that you probably will recall what they're called. What about G here? This one may be a little bit tricky, but does anybody want to help me out here with G?
Central canal.
Central canal, yes. And the central canal actually goes all the way down the spinal cord, right? Okay, that's where the CSF is going to go all the way down until you get to the cauda equina, right? Where it becomes a ponytail and the CSF is going to come out. All right, so now this is some actual picture. It's a CT scan, and we are asked to identify some of these things. Okay, let's see if this color shows up well. Oh, not too bad. So corpus callosum, you can't miss that. So that's like actually what it looks like, right? Pretty cool, right? If you do a mid-sagittal CT scan, right, you're like, oh, that's the corpus callosum. Right? Cerebellum is another easy one to pick out. Right? There is the cerebellum for posture and balance, storing skill memory, and ensuring we can execute our movement in a seamless fashion. Pons, where is the pons? Pons is right here. Okay. And medulla oblongata down here. Is that okay? I hope it makes sense. I really hope it does. Okay, same CT scan here, and now we're gonna look for the ventricles, right? So lateral ventricle, right? It's easy. If you can identify the corpus callosum, then the lateral ventricle is just below it, right? So LV right here. But you know that's not the only you know that's not the size of the LV, right? The lateral ventricle is really, really big, right? And most of it is hidden within the hemisphere, right? Third ventricle is right here. I'm just gonna put 3 here, third ventricle. And like I said, it's in front of the thalamus. Cerebral aqueduct, that's this guy right here, this line, right? CA. And the fourth ventricle, it's between the pons and the cerebellum, right? Just gonna put number 4 here. Right, so I think it's kind of neat to look at an actual picture, and then you look at like the art, the model, or the like a sketch that some artists draw, and be able to see, you know, the resemblance between the two things. Okay. Anything else you guys can identify here? Maybe you wanna show it out, right? Anything particular? Right? Like what about that? What is that?
Isn't that the pituitary gland?
Yep, you got it. Very good, yeah. That's the pituitary gland, right? For hormonal secretion. Okay, good. I mean, everything else is kind of hard to tell. I mean, of course, you can tell this is the cerebrum, okay? But then you can't really see much detail about it. Not in this view anyways, right? All right, fantastic. Let's move on. Back to model. Okay. I always tell a student this brain model cost $400, and it doesn't even sit up properly. You can see it always sit upside down. It was one of those buyer's regret moment that I have when I saw it arrived. In any case, list 3 functions of A. Okay? So A is the again cerebellum, right? So I kind of verbally recite that for you already, but let's write down: maintain posture and balance, okay, or equilibrium if you want to use that word. Store skill memory, and enable smooth execution of voluntary movement. Remember in the lecture notes, right? I had a picture of someone, you know, shooting a basketball, right? Doing a layup, right? And you know, you have to be able to execute that in a seamless manner. That would be the job of the cerebellum, right? Very densely packed neurons in the cerebellum, more connection in the cerebellum alone compared to the rest of the brain combined. And the cerebellum also receives inputs from your vestibule in the inner ear, as well as from the semicircular canal, right? To kind of gain a reference of where your body parts are. Okay, so here we have B, C, D, and E again. And we are looking at the brain from below, right? So B is once again the pituitary gland. Pituitary gland. C is the frontal lobe, although it looks a little bit strange from below, right? Nevertheless, it's still at the front. D is the temporal lobe. And E is the medulla oblongata. All right. So this model, if you were to be handling it, you can actually pull this whole thing out. Okay, the medulla oblongata, you can pull that out, and you can take away the temporal lobe, and then all these stuff remove, and then you'll be left with this. So what is A? Anybody want to answer that? Take a guess, or if you know the answer, what is A?
Is it the corpus? Because
Yeah.
corpus callosum?
Corpus callosum. Okay, yeah, that's a reasonable a choice. But this is a little bit to the side of that. But good try though. Thank you.
Lateral ventricle.
Yes, these are the lateral ventricles. Very good. Okay, so we're used to seeing the lateral ventricle on the side, right? So this is the corpus callosum, and then we see the LV kind of below it, right? Okay, but then afterwards, like if you stick your hand in, I keep on saying if you stick your hand in, right, then it opens up to like this horn-shaped structure, right? Do you guys remember that? Can you visualize what I'm saying? Right, so like this is a part of the lateral ventricle as well, right? So we are actually looking at, if my eyes are down here looking up, this is my eye looking up, right? Then we're seeing like let me see how to describe this to you. We're seeing like the upper part right here. Okay, right, that's what the A is. Is it okay? Like, can you guys visualize what I'm saying? Right, we're looking up, right, from below. Okay, so those would be the lateral ventricle. You know, I remember in university I had to take the course called neuro physiology, and my goodness, the test, one of the tests we had was they have like real brains, okay, like from people who donate their bodies for education purposes. So they have different brains, and I remember it was like a cold winter morning where we had the test. We go down to this basement of some building, and just lying around the room were like brains with like little flags on them. Okay, so you would have they would put a brain there, and then it would be cut in a certain way, and then they would put a flag on a particular spot, and then there is a question related to the part that is being flagged, right? And then we would sit down with our test paper, and then they would give you 1 minute to answer the questions. And then the prof would have a bell, and then she would ring the bell. It was like ding, and then we all had to get up and then move to the next part. And then there will be another brain, and then we have 1 minute to do another question, and you don't get to go back, right? So we just keep on doing it for like I think there were like 30-40 stations. It was one of the most stressful things I had to do, and of course there are not like actual like color models like that. The real brain, after you preserve them, it's just all beige in color, right? I think I actually failed that test. It was really challenging. Anyways, just thought I told you that. I'm not sure why. Next part here, which half of the brain is this? Okay, well, you should know by now. This is the left half of the brain. Left half, left hemisphere. Okay, so if it's the left hemisphere, then we have some special functional area, right? That we can identify. Okay, so what would this be? What area is A and B? Anybody?
Broncos and Werwickle?
Yeah, that's right. So we have the Broca's area and the Wernicke's area. Very good. So those are responsible for creating speech and interpreting written or spoken words, right? So the two will enable human communication. If you damage the Broca's area, then the person had Broca's aphasia. If the person damaged Wernicke's area, then they have Wernicke's aphasia. Okay, so trouble expressing themselves if it's damaged, and trouble understanding things if they damage the Wernicke's area. What is missing at the question mark? What was supposed to be here, and I took it out in this picture.
Cerebellum.
That's right. That is the cerebellum. Okay, remember there's used to be like a dark brown thing right here, right? Label C. Okay, C is talking about this groove right here. That is just the lateral fissure. Lateral sulcus. I think we call it sulcus in class. Sometimes it's like if it's deeper, then they call it a fissure. Okay? Both is okay. Doesn't really matter. Alrighty. Oh, and this thing actually comes apart like that. All right. So A, of course, is the frontal lobe again. Frontal lobe. B, what about B? B is like nicely hidden away. You're not able to see it before, right? But now if you take it apart, you see it. You remember what that is, right? Don't you? What is that? No? Oh, someone sent me a private message. That's correct. It is the insula. Remember, the insula is hidden behind the frontal lobe and, of course, the temporal lobe, right? Temporal lobe. And what kind of senses does the insula process?
Taste.
Taste, that's right. Gustatory, right? Taste. Fun fact, insula is also responsible for helping you understand sarcasm. When someone's being sarcastic, and you know that they're being sarcastic, like, oh, great weather this morning, right? Then you know the person doesn't really mean it, right? Sarcasm, right? So that is being processed in the insula. Right? That's something that you have to learn from social interaction. Like if you try to be sarcastic to your kids, they won't get it. Okay, they would just think you're like being weird. I'm telling you from personal experience. Next, we have another view, medial view. It's the same model. Identify the corpus callosum. You know that by now. Okay, I don't want to bore you too much with this repetition, but repetition is good. It helps you remember things. So that is the corpus callosum. Pineal gland. That may be a challenging one. Anybody know where the pineal gland is? You can describe it by telling me, the color, or like, it's next to what number. Where's the pineal gland? Or you can tell me what it does. Right? You might be wondering, we talked about the pineal gland, did we? What does it do? Min said, is it 23? Where is 20? Oh, 23 is here. Yeah, 23 is the pituitary gland. Okay, good try. That's an other gland, pituitary gland. Pineal gland is here, right here at the back. Okay, that little knob right there. Pineal gland. Okay. What kind of hormone does the pineal gland secrete? Do you guys remember we talked about this at all? Very briefly, though. Very briefly. Starts with an M. Yes, Jumon, melatonin. Thank you. And melatonin, of course, helps you sleep, right? Okay. Something that I feel like I desperately need since they changed the time to 1 hour back. Or forward, sorry, I always get that confused. So like, I still feel like I'm not catching up with that 1 hour. So it secretes melatonin, helps you sleep. Okay, very good. Next we have more brain parts. 21 is the thalamus. 22 is the hypothalamus. And 23, pituitary gland. All right. And that's the last brain model question. Yeah. Next, label as many parts as you can. All right, that's fun. Let's start with the thing right here. Right. What is this outline thingy that's kind of hovering around the? By the way, this is the spinal cord, right? Of course. What is this outline thing? Yep, someone answered with a private message. That is the meninge. Okay, meninge. Right? Probably the dura mater, I would say. Okay, the other stuff it's probably washed away or something when they trying to prepare the specimen. So that is that. Another thing that you can see clearly is the hole in the center. Okay, so that would be the central canal. Right? The stuff on the outside is the white matter. Right? Of course, it looks bluish now because they stain it with a blue dye. And the butterfly is the gray matter, right? Which part is the front of the body? Is this the front of the body or is this the front of the body? Front of the body, is it A or B?
B?
Yep, you can tell how? Just wondering.
You know, the way the spine kind of curves, it curves into your body, not out.
Oh, interesting. Okay, that's one way to look at it. For me, I always look at the butterfly, right? The top of the butterfly is the front of the body. Okay? But what you said was perfectly fine as well. So this is the anterior side, and this is the posterior. Okay, so knowing which way is forward will allow us to determine what kind of tracks we have, right? So located at the back, right? These are primarily ascending tracks. Ascending tracks, which takes information up to the brain, right? Sensory information. It's gonna go all the way up to the medulla oblongata, where it will cross the middle, and then we'll continue to go upwards to the thalamus, where it will get sorted and relayed to the appropriate cortex. At the front, though, we would have the descending tracks, which would be bringing information down. Descending tracks. Okay, on the side is kind of mixed. Okay, some goes up, some goes down. Okay, sketch the sensory neurons. We did that a couple times already, but let's go through it one more time. We will have the sensory neuron coming in at the back, right? It's going to make a connection with the interneuron, which will process the information, okay, whatever it happens to be, like touching a hard surface, perhaps. And then we will, the spinal cord in some cases will be able to make a decision as to what to do with that information and send out a motor output. Okay, so that's the sensory neuron, part of the afferent pathway. Interneuron is only found within the CNS, and then you have the motor neuron, right? So this would form part of your spinal reflex. Right? And these things, of course, are bundled together, and that forms your spinal nerve, which you have 31 pairs of. Okay, That's pretty much everything you should know for the spinal cord. Okay, identify two types of cells here. Okay, most people only see one type, which is this big guy right here. Okay, so this big one would be the neuron. Okay, neuron are precious, they don't really divide. And if they ever do, they do it at an incredibly slow rate that it's not going to be able to replace themselves if it's damaged. And then here you see the nucleus of other cells. You don't really see the entire cells, but then these are actually cells that would protect the neuron, and we call them glial cells, right? And there are different types of glial cells. I'm just gonna quickly list them for you. We have things like astrocyte, which forms the BBB, blood-brain barrier. We have the ependymal cells, which forms the CSF in the choroid plexus. We have the oligodendrocytes and the Schwann cells. Schwann cells, and these forms the myelin, right? Okay. I mean, I don't really know what these glial cells are. It's I would need more information to figure out, but these are some examples of glial cells that we talked about. Okay. Glial cells, of course, help absorb, neurotransmitters as well sometimes, right? Okay, that's it. That's it for the brain. Are we all good? Does anyone have anything you want to ask about the brain before we move on to the sensory organs, sensory structures? Okay. Next, we have the ear. This is a really old model. And a good one too. So let's see. A, it's this right here. And this is the ear, right? In case you can't see it, right? That's the pinna. And so A is the auditory canal. Right? It's just your ear canal, basically. And B, they're pointing at these tubes, right? You should know those tubes are the semicircular canal. C over here, what do you think that is? Anybody recognize what C is and what it does?
Eustachian tube.
Yep, that's right, you got it. That's the Eustachian tube. Right, and sometimes it's called auditory tube if it's easier to say. And this help equalize pressure with the environment, right? So normally it's closed. When you swallow it, opens up, lets the excess pressure that's building up in your head to come out, and it equalizes the pressure. Usually we would need to do this if we are ascending really quickly, like in a plane, and sometimes in an elevator. So this is just like a closer look at this structure right here. I took the picture from above, and you can see that the three semicircular canals are perpendicular to each other. So this one is anterior. Right? And again, if you think about the room that you're in right now, the walls that are to your left and to your right, that would be parallel to the anterior semicircular canal. I'm just gonna put SC for short. And then we have this one, which is the lateral. Lateral, that is gonna be parallel to the floor and the ceiling. And then we have one here in the back, the posterior semicircular canal. That one would be parallel to the wall in front of you or behind you. E is the cochlea. That's for actually hearing. And D, this is a nerve that is mixed nerve because it conveys two sets of information. It conveys information from the from these structures that detects head movement and body movements, as well as from the cochlea. So we call that the vestibulocochlear nerve, right? The cochlear component will go to the temporal lobe, where you will process the sound, and if the sound is related to speech, then it's gonna get sent to the Wernicke's area, right? Whereas the vestibular component, it's gonna go to the cerebellum, where the information is going to be used for maintaining posture and balance. F right here, it's kind of hard to tell from this angle, but believe me, F is the tympanic membrane, the eardrum. If a person pops their eardrum, pops the tympanic membrane, then they won't be able to hear anything anymore, okay? Because then you lack the mechanism to convert sound energy into movement. So they need to have like a cochlear implant. Okay? The implant will help using digital conversion, right? Picks up a sound and then directly pass that onto the inner ear. So like a hearing aid, right? Okay, so next I'm gonna take this thing out, and I took a picture of it, and you can see X and Y here, right? Which bone is this one? If you you remember, we have 3 ossicles, right? Which one is this one?
Malleus?
That is the malleus. Okay, if you see like the big like knob here, like this spherical thing, that reminds you of like a drumstick, reminds me of a drumstick. That's the malleus. And the common name is hammer, right? And if you see like a pointy thing, right, pointy thing, then that tells you it is the incus or the anvil. Anvil. I'm not sure. I asked because this model has been here for ages. Okay, before I became a teacher at Centennial, and I've been teaching there for like, you know, I told you like 14 years, right? So this thing is like ancient. So I try to ask around and say, you know, where is the stay piece? Where is the stirrup? And nobody know whether it was lost or it didn't come with the model. Okay, so you cannot see it in this picture. But this part of the incus, right, would be connected to the stay piece. Okay, so we can just like put that in because you know, why not? And it's called the stirrup. Stirrup is again the thing that you put your feet on if you go to ride a horse. Okay, what is the function of Z? Oh, sorry, what are X, Y, and Z and the stay piece, right? Collectively known as, that would be the ossicle. Ossicles, and the function of the the function of the ossicles is to amplify sound. Okay, you actually have muscle, which is what this number 6 is. We didn't talk about it, but you know, I just feel like talking about it now. The muscle will dampen the action of the ossicle if it's too loud. Okay, so this serve as like something that you can calibrate. Excuse me, that you can calibrate how much to amplify the sound by. Okay? If you're at like a concert and it's like already like super loud, you don't want to damage your ear too much, right? So this muscle will help dampen the action and don't amplify the sound as much as they normally would. What is the function of Z? Z would be the tympanic membrane, which I told you will converts sound energy into movements. Right? It works in the opposite way as a speaker. Okay, next part here. This is an actual model that has all three of the thing here. Right? So A is the one that was missing in the previous diagram, right? And that would be the stay piece. Okay, and what structure does stay piece connect to? And again, right, like I know it sounds like it's pronounced
Oval
stay piece.
window.
That's right. It connects to the oval window. Oval window. Okay. All right, good. Give me a second. Okay, that's good. This is another ear label. Ear diagram. No, so ear model. Sorry, I'm a little bit incoherent this morning. This one is actually pretty cheap. This was only $20. But it does have good information. I actually bought 3 of these. When I say I bought it, I don't mean like me personally bought it. Like, you know, I use your tuition to buy it. So we have 3 of these things. It's pretty nice. So label as many parts as you can. Do you guys want to help me here? Like, you know, just shout out something if you see it, or you know what, maybe I'll just do it. Yeah, maybe I'll just do it myself. It's probably more efficient that way. Because you know, online learning, like I appreciate a lot of you are actually participating, but a lot of you are still kind of shy, right? Maybe, and don't feel comfortable speaking up, but that's okay. So there we have the vestibulocochlear nerve. Okay. Snail shell here is the unmistakably structure, the cochlea. We have our semicircular canals here. Just for completion again, which one is this? Is this anterior, lateral, or posterior? Because what if I point to that and I ask you what kind of head motion will stimulate it? Right? Then you have to know, right? So which one is this? Anterior, posterior, or lateral?
Anterior.
That is the anterior. Okay, very good. And to stimulate that, you will have to nod your head. And we have the lateral, lateral one right here, lateral. And then we have the posterior right there at the back. We have the hammer, the malleus. Need a better pen here. Malleus. Does this show up? Nope. Yellow? Yeah, okay. So that's the malleus. Right here, sorry. Malleus. We see the pointy thing here, that would be the anvil. And you can't really see it from this angle, but you know, the stay piece would be connected. You can see like I always draw the stay piece like this, right? Okay, so like you can see this part right here, and that's part of the stay piece. Can't really see the rest of it though. Stay piece, S-T-A-P-E-S. Right? That's pretty much all you can see from this perspective. Oh, of course, one more thing. What's this here? That connects the cochlea and the semicircular canal. Anybody remember what that is? That location?
Vestibule.
Yeah, the vestibule. And the vestibule has two parts to it, right? The saccule and the utricle. I don't think I put any question about the saccule and the utricle, so don't get too hung up on those. But the vestibule is for detecting acceleration, right? Horizontal acceleration, as in a car, speeding up, slowing down, or vertical acceleration, as in like, dropping, falling. Okay. That's it for the ear, and we have the eyeball. Label ABC. So ABC is just the 3 layers of the eye. Of course, A is the outermost layer, and that would be the sclera, followed by the choroid, which has the blood vessels, and we have the retina. If you open up this eyeball, it has a nice little magnet that keeps it together, so you can actually lift up the top, and we will see a magic ball here. Okay, a crystal ball. What is that actually? E, this big ball. What does it represent? Yep. Okay, someone messaged me. That's the vitreous humor, right? And the function of the vitreous humor is to reinforce the shape of the eyeball. Okay, so it's a gel-like substance that helps reinforce the shape of the eyeball. D is at the front, and that would be the cornea. It's a convex structure, helps collect light from a wide angle. Right? So looking at the eye from the top here, deep structure, F is the optic nerve. And where the optic nerve exits, that's where you will find the blind spot or the optic disc, right? Blind spot. And we did an activity to find the blind spot last time, right? Stay the nervous pathway that carries visual information from F, from the optic nerve, to the brain. So starting at the optic nerve, it's going to go to the optic chiasma, which then goes to the optic tract. Depending on which field the information is from, it will either go to the left optic tract or right optic tract. Okay, left field goes to the right tract. Right field goes to the left tract. And then it's going to go to, of course, the thalamus. And the thalamus will filter the information for you and project the relevant stuff to occipital lobe. Okay. Next, we have H here. Right. H is the fovea. And remember, fovea is actually located on the inside of this bigger area, right? So fovea, I'm just gonna put a note here, located inside the macula. It's in your notes. Okay, so that is have highest cone density. All right. For producing sharpest image. Whatever you're focusing on, that's going to be projected onto the fovea. Eye is the ciliary muscle. Ciliary muscle, which controls tension in suspensory ligaments. Which in turns controls the thickness of the lens. Okay, make sure you know how it does that. You know, contraction of the muscle will make the ligament loosen a little bit, and then the lens will be thicker. And that would be good for focusing on nearby objects, such as reading a book. To look at something far away, ciliary muscle relax, gets bigger, tension increases, pulls on the lens in all directions and make it thinner. So the ability to switch between the two focus, that's called visual accommodation. Okay, more eyeballs. What is found in number 2? Okay, finding number 2 is challenging on its own, but number 2 is right here, and that is like the anterior cavity, right, which is filled with the aqueous humor. And here we see the lens. When it gets cloudy and eventually becomes completely opaque, we call that cataracts. Okay. Cataracts. Okay, that's all for the eye. I think we have like 10 more slides to go. Sorry if this is a little bit, you know, dry, because we're just like labeling all these things. But, you know, it's important review that might help. So we have the head here. This is like a whole body thing, model, right? Like this is the head, and then that's the body of the model, and then we just look at everything that we can find here. Okay, not everything is related to the current unit, but nevertheless, we've learned all of it up to this point in the course. So number 4 here, that is the cerebrum. 5 is corpus callosum. Number 6, cerebellum. Number 6 is right here, right? So 4, 5, 6. Number 7 is this tiny thing, which is the pons. 8 is going to be the spinal cord, right? Because it's outside of the brain already, you see, right? These are actually your backbone in the neck. Number 9, right here, number 9 is the nasal cavity. Number 10, that's the tongue. Okay, just gonna give you a moment to catch up. And if you know what 11 is, please let me know. What is 11?
Hard palate?
Yes, very good. Do you remember which 2 bone makes up the hard palate? Leah, or anyone else? What 2 bones?
I kind of forgot.
Yeah, that's okay. Anyone remember? For the hard palate? We just learned it like on Monday, right? I think. So hard palate. That's not how you spell palate. P-A-L-A-T, yeah, hard palate. And it's made up of two bones, right? Maxilla at the front. Maxilla also makes up like the upper lip here, right? With the socket for the teeth, and the palatine. Okay, number 12 is the soft palate, which is glandular tissue. Not sure why there's a J here. It's probably like when I copied the slide from the last diagram, it just came along with it. Yeah, J was the, let me see. Yeah, probably like this J got copied over, so don't worry about that. Number 13 though, number 13 is the extension of the soft palate. That would be the uvula, which seals the nasopharynx, so food don't go up when we swallow. Number 14, very few people get number 14. Okay? Like they always ask me to come over and explain what number 14 is. That would be the adenoid tonsil, which we learned like way back in the respiratory system, right? Okay, so that's everything in the head. Right? I mean, there are other things that you can label as well for sure, like the thalamus here, right? Lateral ventricle, right? So many additional things. You have the frontal sinus here, many things. Trachea. Okay, moving on. Label all the numbered structures, starting with 16. 16, it's a part of the respiratory system. That would be the thyroid. Excuse me, thyroid cartilage. It protects your larynx, right? 17 is talking about this gland, right? That would be the thyroid gland, which secretes hormones to regulate metabolism. More to come later in later lectures. Number 19, 20, 21. That's just the lung. And we have 3 lobes, remember? Superior, middle, and inferior. There is a tiny number here, 23. That would be the aorta. That was the first thing we learned. And I know you can't really see like maybe from my screen, but if you zoom in there, there's number 24 tucked in right there. And that would be the pulmonary artery. Okay. You know, for those of you going into the nursing program, practical nursing program, you actually have to learn all these things again, right? In more detail. So make sure you you keep the notes. Download everything you need from the website. And if you like the YouTube videos that I created, make sure you bookmark them. I'm not going to take them down, right? But then it's hard for me to find them later, because I actually receive emails from students, like my former students who move on to nursing, and a lot of times they ask me, "Oh, can you email me the notes, right?" Because they want to look at it again. So it's easier if you download all the notes yourself before the end of the course and bookmark everything that you need. Okay, so over here, do you guys know what I took out? Like there is a thing that's supposed to be there, but then I took it out so that you can see it. What did I remove?
Liver?
Yep, both of you are correct. Okay, so like I removed the liver on the right side, and then I removed the stomach on the left side, right? Okay, so number 35 here, that would be the pancreas. 35 is pancreas, which secretes pancreatic juice. that goes into the duodenum. 41 here is part of the colon, and the stuff goes across. That is the transverse. Transverse colon. 34 is right here. That would be the jejunum. Right. This would be the beginning of the duodenum, which goes behind the transverse colon, and then it transitions into the jejunum, right? 42 is kind of hiding right there. That would be the descending colon. Okay. There's no number for this thing, but that's the spleen. We labeled it last time as well. Okay. Oh, that's a repeat. We're just gonna skip that. Familiarize yourself with different parts of the large intestine. Everything is labeled here, so you just have to read it yourself, right? We have the cecum. Remember, that's the first part that connects to our small intestine, right, to the ileum. And there's the appendix branching off from the cecum. And we labeled this last time with the ascending, transverse, descending, and sigmoid. Yeah, I know in our diagram it looks like it was going sideways, but actually it goes like inward, right? It goes posterior, and then it becomes the rectum. Okay, because the bladder is in the way, right? This is of course the urinary bladder that we're talking about. Okay, so you just gotta go through the labels yourself. Okay, stomach. A, that's the esophagus. And of course, it's gonna go through the esophageal hiatus, right? Which is the hole in the diaphragm. And then we have a sphincter here. That's the cardiac sphincter. And down here, we have the pyloric sphincter. Okay, so cardiac sphincter keeps the stuff in the stomach so it doesn't come back up and irritate your esophagus unless we are vomiting or having heartburn. And pyloric sphincter controls how much of the chyme is going to go forward, right? So remember, the stomach is going to be filled up with these gastric juices, and then after you digest the food, it becomes chyme, right? So the chyme will go forward to the duodenum. Okay. And C, of course, is just the stomach itself. And all these foldings, right? We call them rugae. They are just like little wrinkles, little folds that you have when the stomach is empty. All right, moving on. A here is the, of course, liver. In relation to digestion, the liver produces bile, which will be stored in the gallbladder. And the gallbladder will be secreted through the bile duct, which is shown here in this green thing. And it will go into the duodenum. So I'm not sure if you see this, but this is the lumen, and it's connected to the stomach, right? And this is going to go to the jejunum. Over here, we have, of course, the pancreas again, right? And it can secretes pancreatic juice, which contains digestive enzyme. And we label a lot of them. I'm sorry, we talked about several of these things, right? There's the amylase, there's the pepsin, trypsin, right? Just make sure you're familiar with some of those things. And also sodium bicarbonate for neutralizing the chyme. When they get to the duodenum. That's it. Okay, so the next few slides, the remaining slides are all microscope slides, and microscope slides are not going to be included on the lab quiz. Those would, like all the microscope slides of all the lectures, will only show up on your last lab quiz, right? Which would be 5% instead of 2.5%. So here we are asked to identify the 4 layers of the GI tract. Okay, so let's see if we can highlight them. The innermost layer, the dark purple, that's the mucosa. Yeah, like this part right here. That is the mucosa. And then outside of the mucosa, we have the submucosa. That is where you're gonna have like the blood vessels, the nerve endings, the lymphatic vessels. Then we have 2 layers of muscularis, right? Circular is the inner one, and then longitudinal is the outer one. And together they perform peristalsis. Wave-like contractions, right? The squeeze and the push helps propel the food forward. In the case of esophagus, we will be pushing the bolus, B-O-L-U-S, the bolus forward, right? You can't really see, it's really faint in this diagram, but you know it's there, the outermost layer. Right? That goes all the way around. That would be the serosa, which kind of hangs everything in place, as well as creates like a fluid that lubricates the surface. Okay. Over here, we have the same 4 layers, but now we're looking at, instead of like a transverse section, we're looking at like a sagittal cut of your small intestine. And let's see what we can identify here. So this here, we have the mucosa. And then the next part is the submucosa. Right here. And then we have the 2 layers of the muscularis, right? This would be the circular. Oh, you can't see that color, can you? Just gotta go back to yellow then. Circular, muscularis, and the longitudinal. and just a really thin layer of serosa in this superficial layer. Okay. So this one shows the small intestine again. And I think we have a similar diagram in the lecture notes. So the PC is actually the circular folds. Remember, the small intestine has these structures to increase surface area, right? So circular folds is definitely one of them. ME is the muscularis. I'm not sure why they use these labels, but whatever, doesn't matter. L is the lacteal. I think I didn't really quite explain the lacteal very well in class. I just remember that. So this is like your villus, right? One of those little projections on your columnar cells. And this would be in the later part of the small intestine, the jejunum and the ileum. And so you would have your blood vessels that are coming up in the submucosa. Okay, so that's the blood vessels, which helps with the absorption of the nutrients, right? But lipids cannot be absorbed directly into the bloodstream because they would be insoluble in the water. And so what happens is inside the capillary network, there is going to be a lymphatic vessel. Okay, so these are specialized lymphatic vessel for lipid absorption. And the lipid will go into the lymphatic vessels and be taken to the liver, where it will be processed. Right? It will be combined with these lipoproteins, and then it will be soluble in the blood. Okay, so that's what the lacteal is for. It's located inside the capillary network of the villus, and they are used for absorbing fat. Okay, so over here, V is talking about the villus, and then we have the submucosa. That's what the SM is for, right? This is this layer right here, submucosa. And the MUC, which is right here, that would be the innermost layer. That's a mucosa. Okay, right here, MUC. That's it. One last picture, and then we can have a break. That's the tongue. Right? You remember these things now, right? These little knobby things. Those are the papillae. And the taste buds are these ones that are located on the side, right? Okay, so all those are taste buds. And of course, this would be the surface of the tongue where the food is going to be. All right. So the lab quiz number 2 is already available online. You have until next Tuesday to complete it. Just like before, it's 2 attempts. It's just like 2.5%, right? But you know, it adds up. 2.5 for the first one, 2.5 for this one, total 5%. And usually people do quite well on it. Okay, so why don't we take a break? Let's go for like a 10-minute break today. Okay, this is just because like I've been talking for so long. You guys probably need a, you know, good 10 minutes to refresh. Yeah, go ahead.
Can you please go back to the last slide? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, sure, no problem. Okay, so we'll resume at 10 o'clock. All right, see you in a bit. All right. Let's keep going here. I mean, a lot of the review questions are very similar to what we just did with the with the online lab. So if you feel like you've understand most of it already, and then you prefer to watch the recordings later instead of sitting through the section, that's totally fine. It's not a problem at all. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to fill this in with the class and see if you have any questions along the way. So let's start with the thalamus. Okay, what do we know about the thalamus? First of all, we know it is gray matter. That's an important piece of information, because generally speaking, the brain is gray matter on the surface and white matter on the inside, right? So thalamus, despite being on the inside of the brain, it is made up of gray matter. Not surprisingly, because its function is to sort and relay, right? Sorts and relay sensory information. And again, except for smell. Hypothalamus. Hypothalamus is the master gland, and it helps maintain homeostasis through hormones. And we will be learning some of those hormones in Unit 3. Okay. It's important to note that the hypothalamus works closely with the pituitary gland. The pituitary gland is located below the hypothalamus. Okay. And it makes its own hormone. As well as store hormones made in the hypothalamus. Okay. And its secretions would be regulated by the hypothalamus. Okay, regulated by hypothalamus. Next, we have the hippocampus, which we did not see in the lab. But hippocampus is responsible for long-term memory. Long-term memory. Of course, not everything gets stored in the long-term memory. A lot of it is going to be screened by the amygdala, right? And see if it's worth storing in long-term memory, right? So amygdala is responsible for emotions, right? Especially and also screen events to determine if it should go to long-term memory.
Professor, which study guide is this?
Oh, this is the test 2 review.
Okay.
Let me post a link for you, okay? Give me a second. So, short-term memories are things that you remember, just for a brief moment. A perfect example is like those codes, those security codes that you get like on your phone when they're trying to verify it's you, like if you're trying to log into an account or something like that, right? And you know, you get that number on your phone, you know, like, oh, 223-416, 223-416. You say that a couple of times, and then you key it into your browser or whatever, right? And then as soon as you key it in, then you forget about the code, right? So that's an example of like short-term memory. It's not worth storing it in your long-term memory. So your amygdala screens that out for you. For anyone who's looking for this review package, I just posted a link in the chat box and you can click on it, all right? Medulla oblongata, one of the earliest brain part that we learn. This is of course part of the brainstem. The other parts of the brainstem include the pons and the midbrains. And the medulla oblongata is a location where 90% of tracks, as in like ascending tracks and descending tracks, cross the midline. Okay. And medulla oblongata contains reflex center, and respiratory center to regulate breathing, right? And some reflexes that occurs at the medulla oblongata include things like swallowing, right? Sneezing, coughing, right? These are reflexes. Cranial reflexes, because it involves the brain, as opposed to spinal reflexes, which only involves the spinal cord. Reticular formation. Okay, so the reticular formation is a web of gray matter, right? That is kind of projecting throughout the brain, and its function is just to collect sensory information and maintain consciousness. That's also the part that wakes you up, right? Wakes you up from sleep. Right? If there's a sudden loud sound or something when you're sleeping, the reticular formation would arouse your cerebrum immediately, and then you wake up from your sleep, right? Damage to the reticular formation is going to result in coma. Next, we have the corpus callosum. You must be sick of hearing me talking about the corpus callosum. It's the white matter that allows communication between hemispheres. Okay, I'd be so disappointed if you get this wrong on the test. We talk about it like so many times. Cerebellum, again, the three functions, we also wrote it down earlier. Maintain equilibrium, right? So we don't lose our balance. Skill memory storage. And then smooth execution. Oops. Of movements. Right, like I said, damage to the cerebellum, the person would look like they're kind of walking as though they are drunk. The pons. This is where the tracks. So it allows tracks to connect to different brain regions. Right? It's just a bridge. Right? Also contains various reflex center. Okay? We talk about visual reflex and auditory reflex. Right? If there's a flash of light that occurs suddenly, then you would look, right? You can't help but to look. That would be the pons. If you hear a loud sound, something drop, right? You instinctively look in the direction of that sound. That would be the pons doing its job. Choroid plexus, right? They are found on the walls of ventricles in the brain, and they contains ependymal cells. That make cerebral spinal fluid. Okay. That's it. Just remember something. Let's go back here for a moment. I'm gonna highlight some of these things and you tell me why I am highlighting them. Okay, we have this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy. Why am I highlighting them? What do they belong to? Part of the what?
Limbic system.
Yes, part of the limbic system. Very good. And the limbic system is responsible for like reward, right? Okay, remember we talked about that scenario where you fell down and then you feel like, you know, embarrassed and stuff like that, right? So your limbic system kicks in, right? Like next time you'll remember to avoid that location, right? Because it hurts and it was embarrassing, right? So you have to be careful. So these things are part of the limbic system. Okay, next, we're gonna have to highlight brain parts. Okay, so we have the primary motor cortex, which you should know again is located at the precentral gyrus. Okay, so there is your central gyrus right here, central sulcus rather, and then in front of it would be the premotor cortex. And again, you know by now it's voluntary movement. Primary somatosensory cortex would be behind the central sulcus, and that's for somatosenses. Okay, we already roll out the detailed description in the lab, so I'm just gonna leave it like that. Broca's area is only on the left side of the brain for most people, and that is for speech, articulate, fluent speech. The Wernicke's area is for interpretation. So comprehension, we can say comprehension. Comprehension of speech and text. Okay. So those are the key areas in each lobe. Describe the anatomy of the spinal cord. We already did that in the lab, right? With the motor neuron and the interneuron and the sensory neuron. So we're not going to go through that again, but make sure you have good understanding of it. And you know, we drew in detail what happens when you touch a hot surface and how the information gets processed, right? So you should trace that out yourself and make sure you know what goes where, and be able to answer questions related to those things. Okay, so here we have a bunch of multiple choice. Let's take them up. Identify the indicator part, right? So if you see this question, again, you should be sick of it. You're like, oh, it's that thing again. We talk about it so many times. It's the corpus callosum. Okay. This over here, right? You should recognize is the pons. And over here, let's do a poll. Why not? We haven't done any polls today yet. Let me know what you think. Okay, so that would be this one is not a function of the cerebellum, right? That's a cerebellum. Maintaining alertness and consciousness. That's the function of the reticular formation. Okay, so that would be a D right there. What area is found in the indicated region? Again, this is one of those questions that you have to get. It's just because we talk about it so many times already. It's the primary motor cortex. And this one here, this is a interesting view that we don't really see often. What are we pointing at there in the diagram? Okay, I only have 3 responses. Does anybody want to try before I end the poll? Anyone else? So log in their answer. Now, this one is a little bit tricky, right? Okay, but this is a diagram straight from your PowerPoint, and we are pointing at the thalamus. Thalamus. Okay, you have 2 of them, right? And sandwiched between the thalamus, of course, is the third ventricle. This is also a diagram from your textbook. I mean, from your lecture notes. And that is the dural venous sinus to drain CSF. If you don't drain your CSF, then you might have hydrocephalus. Hydrocephalus. Okay, we also talk about this area multiple times already. So if you see this question, you should know it is the Broca's area. Okay, this one requires maybe a little bit of thinking. Let's give it a try. Okay, thank you for those who had participated. The correct answer is unable to feel from right side of the body, because this is pointing at the primary somatosensory cortex, right? I know because it's behind the central sulcus right here. So that's for feeling. And because we're looking at the left side of the brain, then the person would not be able to feel the right side of the body, right? Okay, so that's the answer, B. Okay, that's all for the brain for now. And now we have a bunch of conditions, and we are asked to write down what the main problem is. So let's do that. Let's do that. Hydrocephalus, I just talked about that moments ago. That is the flow of CSF is blocked. Okay, doesn't have to be the draining problem. It could be there's a tumor blocking the cerebral aqueduct, for example, and then that would block the flow from the third to the fourth ventricle, right, causing it to build up. That could lead to hydrocephalus. Meningitis is the inflammation of the meninges. Okay. The person would have to do like an X-ray or spinal tap to diagnose. Glaucoma is increase in eye pressure, which then leads to the damage optic nerve. Right? One of the reasons why there would be an increase in eye pressure is the buildup of the aqueous humor and the vitreous humor. The draining is not happening fast enough. That would damage the eye, optic nerve in the eye. Astigmatism, that's when you see the scattering of light, and it's particularly difficult to see at night, and when there's like bright light, they kind of scatter, and this is caused by uneven lens. Right? The lens shape is, it's not smooth, so to speak, and what that does, it leads to scattering of light. Light rays in retina. So instead of creating a sharp focal point on the fovea, it's kind of all over the place. Next, we have presbyopia, which is the loss of ability to visual accommodate. Okay, you can't change the thickness of the lens fast enough. Right, so when you shift your focus, try to read something close by, your eye's not focusing. It's difficult to see. You need reading glasses for that. Excuse me. Floaters. Floaters are debris that builds up in the aqueous humor. Right, so just floating around. You can see them when you look at a bright background like the sky or the computer screen. Talk about cataracts earlier in the lab review. That would be the clouding of the lens. So proteins in the lens starts to crystallize, and then it causes the lens to eventually become opaque. Myopia, that's nearsightedness, and the eyeball is too long. Right? So to fix this, we need to have a diverging lens, right? So make sure you review that for the test. The opposite of nearsightedness is farsightedness, which is called hyperopia. In this case, the eyeball is too short. So the focal point is behind the retina, and you would need to have a converging lens to fix that. All right, moving on. As light ray enters your eyes, list all the structure it passes through. Let me just pull up an eyeball here and quickly talk about it with you. Do you have an eyeball here somewhere? Eyeball, yeah. So all the structure that passes through, right? So this is the eyelid. If you open the eyelid, the light would enter, and first it will hit the cornea, pass through the aqueous humor, through the pupil, and then through the lens. The lens would focus the light rays, which would travel through the vitreous humor and then onto the fovea. Okay, so that's all the things it's going to pass through. Right? And then once it hits the fovea, it would get converted into action potential, which then get passed on to the optic nerve, and then optic chiasma, and then the rest of the path that we talked about, right? Make sure you familiarize yourself with this this situation here with the view of views, right? You can almost see how I can create a question that is confusing on that, right? Okay, just make sure you have this diagram with you when you do the test, and you should be okay. Label the ears, diagram and state of function. I'm pretty sure you can do this part yourself. We already labeled the model. I think everything is kind of obvious here, so I'm just gonna leave that for you to do. The only one that you might have trouble labeling is this one. Okay, so this over here, that's the round window. Okay, and then the oval window, there is nothing pointing to it, but it's gonna be behind this stay piece here, right? So the function of the round window is to relieve excess pressure that gets built up in the cochlea as the sound waves travels through the interior. All right. So just a couple more multiple choice here, and then we'll be done. Which of the following is not a function of the digestive system? Ingestion of food, that's the function. Absorption of nutrient, yes. Elimination of indigestible waste, yes. Movement of nutrients to the cell, that is not a function of the digestive system. Okay, that's just something that happens with like passive transport and active transport, right? Which of the following is not a function of saliva? Saliva starts the digestion of protein. That is the incorrect one. Okay, protein digestion does not occur until you get to the stomach, where you have the hydrochloric acid and the pepsin. Okay, saliva does everything else. Moisten the food for swallowing. Remember the story about the cinnamon, right? Start to the digestion of starch by having amylase. Most of the starch, like 80% of starch is made up of amylase, right? Remove microbes because saliva contains the lysozyme, right? Food that leaves the mouth and enters the pharynx is in the form of a bolus. Bolus. Right? Chyme is what you get after it spends some time in the stomach, right? Next, carbohydrates are first chemically digested in the mouth because of the amylase. Protein digestion starts at the stomach, and lipid digestion starts in the duodenum. By the time we get to the large intestine, most of the stuff would have been digested and absorbed. It's only just water and indigestible material when it gets to the large intestine. What prevents acid from backing up into the esophagus from the stomach? That would be the cardiac sphincter, right? Cardiac sphincter. This diagram we already labeled, so I don't think we have to do that again. And that's it. Okay. I think the digestive system is the easy one. Like the parts that gives you the most of trouble is probably the brain. But you know, I didn't put too many tricky questions there. I mean, there are a few application questions that you have to think, but otherwise it's pretty straightforward. All right. Now I know, like I said, the test is not until Wednesday, so you have a little bit of time to prepare. But you must come to Monday's class. Right? The kidney, actually, like all of the last 4 lectures in the course, they are quite complicated. Okay, but kidneys are like particularly complicated, so please do attend on Monday. Otherwise, yeah, enjoy the rest of the week, and if you have any question, please email me. All right, have a good one, guys. Bye for now.